The morning sun rose over the grand arena of the Drakari Empire. The massive stone structure could hold 50,000 people, and today, every seat was filled. Banners of crimson and gold hung from the tall walls. The air smelled of incense and dragon smoke. Today was the choosing ceremony. Lyra Chen stood at the edge of the arena floor, her hands shaking. She wore simple brown clothes that were too big for her thin frame. Her black hair was tied back in a messy bun. Dirt still stained her fingernails from working in the dragon stables that morning. She should not be here. Move along, Humyn, a guard said, pushing her forward with the end of his spear. Stand with the other candidates. Lyra stumbled forward onto the sandy arena floor. Around her stood 30 young warriors from across the empire. Most were Drakari, tall reptilian beings with scaled skin and sharp eyes. They wore armor that gleamed in the sunlight. They carried weapons and stood with the confidence of trained soldiers. Lyra carried nothing. She knew nothing about fighting. She was 16 years old and worked cleaning dragon pens for 2 copper coins a day. This was a mistake. A terrible mistake. Look at that. One Drakari candidate laughed, pointing at Lyra. They let a stable girl join the ceremony? What's next? Will they let the rats choose dragons too? The other candidates laughed. Even the ones from other conquered worlds, the tall Valorians with their blue skin. The stocky Krennic with their 4 arms joined in the mockery. Humans were the weakest species in the Empire. Everyone knew this. Lyra kept her eyes down. She had learned long ago that speaking back only made things worse. On the opposite side of the arena, a massive gate began to open. The crowd went silent. Even the laughing candidates stopped and turned to face the gate. Head trainer Vex Thor walked out first. He was old for a Drakari, with silver scales along his jaw and numerous scars across his face and arms. He had overseen 40 choosing ceremonies in his lifetime. Behind him walked 12 assistant trainers, each carrying long staffs. But the crowd was not looking at the trainers. They were looking at what came after. Dragons. 20 young war dragons walked into the arena, their claws clicking against the stone floor. Even though they were young, barely 5 years old, each dragon was already the size of a large transport vehicle. Their scales shimmered in colors of red, blue, black, and green. Their eyes glowed with intelligence. Smoke drifted from their nostrils. War dragons were the reason the Drakari Empire controlled half the known galaxy. A single adult war dragon could destroy a city. A wing of war dragons could take down battleships, and a bonded dragon rider pair was worth 1,000 regular soldiers. The dragons were everything. And the choosing ceremony was sacred. Vex Thor raised his staff and struck it against the ground 3 times. The sound echoed through the arena. Candidates, his voice boomed across the space. You stand here today for the greatest honor the Empire can offer. These young dragons will choose their riders. If a dragon approaches you, you will place your hand upon its head. If the bond forms, you will feel it in your mind and heart. You will become dragon riders, warriors of the Empire, protectors of our worlds. He paused and his eyes scanned the candidates. When his gaze passed over Lyra, his lip curled slightly. The dragons choose based on strength, courage, tactical intelligence, and warrior spirit. They have never been wrong. In 300 years of bringing humans into the Empire, not a single dragon has ever chosen a human rider. He smiled coldly. I suspect today will be no different. The crowd laughed. Lyra felt her face grow hot with shame. Let the choosing begin. The trainers stepped back. The dragons began to move forward, walking slowly between the lines of candidates. Each dragon took its time, stopping to sniff or study different warriors. A massive black dragon approached a Drakari warrior who stood at attention. The dragon circled him once, twice, then pressed its head against the warrior's chest. The Drakari placed his hand on the dragon's head and his eyes went wide. The crowd cheered. The first bond was made. One by one, dragons made their choices. A blue dragon chose a Valorian female. A green dragon chose a Krennic warrior. Each time a bond formed, the crowd erupted in celebration. Lyra watched, trying to stay invisible. She stood at the far end of the line of candidates, hoping the ceremony would end quickly so she could return to her stable work. This was not her world. These were not her people. Then she saw it. A small dragon, well, small compared to the others, was walking along the line. Its scales were deep crimson, the color of burning coals. Its eyes were bright gold. Unlike the other dragons that moved with predatory grace, this one seemed almost curious. It looked at each candidate with genuine interest, tilting its head like it was asking questions. The crimson dragon stopped in front of a tall Drakari warrior. The warrior smiled confidently and reached out his hand. The dragon sniffed his palm, then moved on. The warrior's smile faded. The dragon continued down the line. It passed a Valorian, then 2 more Drakari, then a Krennic. It kept walking. Vex's Thor watched the crimson dragon with narrowed eyes. "Ember," he called out. "Choose, young one. These are fine warriors," but the dragon Ember did not stop. It walked past every remaining candidate until it reached the end of the line, where Lyra stood. Lyra's breath caught in her throat as the dragon approached her. She took a step back, but there was nowhere to go. The arena wall was right behind her. Ember stopped directly in front of her. The dragon lowered its head and looked into Lyra's eyes. Up close, Lyra could see the intelligence there, the awareness. This was not a mindless beast. This was a thinking, feeling being. "I'm sorry," Lyra whispered. "I think you're confused. I'm nobody. I'm just—" Ember sat down. The arena went completely silent. Sitting before someone was the highest sign of respect in dragon culture. It was a gesture older than the Empire itself, from the ancient days when dragons first bonded with riders. A dragon only sat before someone they recognized as a true warrior. Someone worthy of absolute respect. Lyra stared at the dragon in shock. No, you've made a mistake." Ember remained sitting. The dragon's golden eyes never left Lyra's face. Vex Thor's smile had completely disappeared. His face had gone pale beneath his scales. Around the arena, the crowd began to murmur. Trainers looked at each other in confusion. Candidates stood frozen in disbelief. "This is impossible," Vex Thor said quietly. Then louder. "This is impossible." But there was no denying what everyone could see. The young war dragon had chosen. And it had chosen a human girl. Ember remained sitting, patient and certain, before Lyra Chen. The stable girl, who should never have been there. The human who was supposed to be too weak, too emotional, too soft for the honor. Yet here sat a dragon, offering everything. Lyra's hands were shaking as she slowly, carefully, reached out and placed her palm on Ember's warm scales. The moment they touched, the world exploded with light and sound inside Lyra's mind. She gasped as she felt another consciousness join hers, ancient, powerful, and impossibly gentle. Memories that were not hers flashed through her thoughts. She felt the wind beneath wings she did not have. She felt the heat of fire in a throat that was not her own. And beneath it all, she felt one emotion clearly. Acceptance. Ember had not made a mistake. The dragon knew exactly what it was doing. In the stands, someone began to boo, then another, then hundreds. The sound grew louder and louder, until the entire arena shook with disapproval. But Lyra barely heard it. She was lost in the bond, in the connection with this magnificent creature who had seen something in her that no one else ever had. Vex Thor stood in the center of the arena, his staff gripped tightly in his clawed hand. His mind raced. In 40 ceremonies, he had never seen anything like this. The laws were clear: a dragon's choice could not be rejected. It was sacred tradition. But a human? A weak, fragile human? He looked at Ember, still sitting peacefully before the girl. He looked at Lyra, tears running down her face as she experienced the bond. And head trainer Vex Thor realized that his carefully ordered world was about to change forever. Whether anyone was ready for it or not, 12 high-ranking Drakari officials sat around a circular stone table. Their scales gleamed under the crystal lights. Their eyes burned with frustration. At the head of the table sat Commander Zex Rao, the oldest member of the Dragon Rider Council. Vex Thor stood in the center of the circle, his hands clasped behind his back. He had been standing there for 2 hours, while the council argued about what to do with Lyra and Ember. "This is an insult to our traditions," shouted Council Member Vortek, slamming his fist on the table. "A human? Bonded with a war dragon? It makes us look weak." "The law is clear," another council member said quietly. "A dragon's choice cannot be rejected. It is our oldest and most sacred rule." "Then change the law. We cannot simply—" "Enough!" Commander Zexral's voice cut through the argument. The room fell silent. The old commander's eyes were cold as he looked at Vex Thor. "Head trainer, you have overseen 40 ceremonies. In your expert opinion, is the bond genuine?" Vex Thor hesitated. He had checked the bond himself, using ancient techniques passed down through generations of trainers. He had expected to find weakness, perhaps a mistake in the bonding process. Instead, he had found something that disturbed him deeply. The bond between Lyra and Ember was stronger than any he had seen in years. It was pure, clear, and absolutely real. "Yes, Commander," Vex Thor said finally. "The bond is genuine." Angry muttering filled the chamber again. Zexral raised his hand for silence. "Then we have no choice. We must honor the dragon's selection." He paused, and a slow smile spread across his face. "However, the law says nothing about making the training easier." Understanding dawned on the faces around the table. Vortek grinned, showing sharp teeth. "The girl will train," Zexral continued. "She will face the same trials as any Dragon Rider candidate. In fact, perhaps we should place her in advanced training with our most experienced warriors. If she truly deserves this honor, she will survive. If not," he shrugged, "the problem solves itself." Vex Thor felt something twist in his stomach. He knew what advanced training meant. Brutal combat exercises designed for seasoned Drakari warriors who had trained their entire lives. The girl would be broken within a week, but he said nothing. He simply bowed his head and accepted his orders. Lyra woke before dawn in her new quarters. The room was small but clean, with a sleeping mat, a wash basin, and a small window that looked out over the training grounds. It was better than the shared stable quarters she had lived in before, but it felt empty and cold. Through the window, she could see Ember sleeping in the dragon yards. Even from a distance, she could feel their connection, a warm presence at the back of her mind that never went away. She dressed in the training clothes they had given her, rough gray pants and a gray shirt that hung loose on her small frame. Her hands were already covered in blisters from yesterday's training. Her muscles ached from exercises she did not know her body could do. The training bell rang. Lyra grabbed her practice sword and hurried outside. The advanced training yard was already full of warriors. 20 Drakari fighters, all at least 10 years older than Lyra, all veterans with battle experience. They stood in perfect formation, their armor gleaming, their weapons ready. Lyra took her place at the end of the line. She felt their eyes on her, felt their judgment. "Today we practice mounted combat maneuvers," shouted the training master, a scarred Drakari named Kexval. "Partners will fly attack patterns while defending against ground targets. Begin." The warriors moved to their dragons. Lyra ran to Ember, who was waiting by the flight yard fence. The moment she got close, she felt Ember's concern through their bond. "You are hurt?" Ember's thoughts came to her mind. The dragon could not speak words, but Lyra understood the meaning clearly. "I'm okay," Lyra whispered, climbing onto Ember's back. The saddle felt wrong, designed for larger Drakari bodies. She had to grip tightly just to stay on. They took off into the sky. Flying was still new to Lyra, and her stomach lurched as Ember climbed higher. Around them, other Dragon Rider pairs moved through complex aerial patterns with ease. "Human girl," Kexval shouted from below. "Dive pattern 7, now." Lyra had no idea what dive pattern 7 was. She tried to remember the manual she had read last night, but her mind went blank. "I know this pattern," Ember's thoughts came to her. "Trust me." Before Lyra could respond, Ember dove. The world became a blur of wind and speed. Lyra's grip slipped on the saddle. She screamed as she felt herself sliding sideways. At the last moment, Ember leveled out, allowing Lyra to regain her seat. They landed hard, and Lyra fell off the saddle onto the ground. Laughter echoed across the training yard. HFY shook his head in disgust. "Pathetic," he said. "Again." They trained for 6 hours straight. By the end, Lyra could barely lift her arms. Her legs shook. Blood dripped from a cut on her forehead where she had hit the saddle during a rough landing. But something strange was happening. Each time they flew, the connection between Lyra and Ember grew stronger. The dragon began sharing things with her, not words, but feelings, instincts, memories. Lyra started to understand how Ember thought, how the dragon moved, how they could work together. During one exercise, Ember showed her a memory from generations past, ancient dragons flying with the first riders, moving as one being instead of two. The old riders had not commanded their dragons. They had danced with them. That evening, as Lyra cleaned her wounds in her quarters, Vex Thor came to visit. "You should quit," he said without greeting. He stood in her doorway, his arms crossed. "This training will only get harder. You are not built for this. Humyn. You will die here." Lyra looked up at him. Her face was bruised, her hands were bleeding, but her eyes were steady. "Ember chose me," she said quietly. "I won't abandon that choice." The dragon made a mistake. "No." Lyra stood up, wincing at the pain in her legs. "I don't think so. I think maybe everyone else made the mistake." Vex's Thor frowned. "What do you mean?" "The way you train," Lyra said carefully. "You treat dragons like weapons. You command them, control them, force them to obey. But Ember doesn't want that. Ember wants to work with me, not just for me." "That is weakness," Vex Thor said, but his voice was uncertain. "Is it?" Lyra walked to her window and looked out at Ember, who was curled up sleeping in the yard. Today, during training, Ember shared memories with me. Memories of the first riders, from thousands of years ago. They didn't fight the way you do now. They were partners. Vex Thor was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Those are just stories, legends." "Maybe," Lyra said. "Or maybe you forgot what dragon riding was supposed to be." After Vex Thor left, Lyra lay down on her sleeping mat. Every part of her body hurt. Tomorrow would be even harder. She knew the trainers were trying to break her, to make her quit. But through the bond, she felt Ember's presence. Strong, steady, believing in her. And Lyra realized something important. She was not alone in this. She had never been alone, not since the moment Ember had sat down before her. The next 3 weeks were the hardest of Lyra's life. The trainers pushed her beyond anything she thought possible. They made her run until she collapsed. They made her fight opponents twice her size. They made her fly in storms and darkness. But each day, something changed. Lyra learned to feel what Ember was thinking before the dragon moved. She learned to shift her weight at exactly the right moment. She learned to trust the bond completely, and Ember learned from her too. The dragon discovered that Lyra's smaller size could be an advantage, making their movements faster and more precise. Ember found that Lyra's different way of thinking, more creative, less rigid than Drakari warriors, led to tactics no one expected. They began to move together in ways that surprised the trainers. During combat exercises, they dodged when they should have blocked. They retreated when others would attack. They worked as one unit, anticipating each other perfectly. One morning, during a particularly brutal training session, something remarkable happened. Lyra and Ember were facing 3 other dragon rider pairs in a mock battle. They were supposed to lose. It was meant to teach Lyra about accepting defeat with honor. Instead, they won. Using a combination of speed, unexpected maneuvers, and perfect coordination, Lyra and Ember outflew and outfought all 3 pairs. When the training bell rang to end the exercise, the other warriors sat on the ground in shock. HFY stared at them, his mouth open. From the observation tower, Vex Thor watched with troubled eyes. He had seen something during that battle, something that awakened old memories he had tried to forget. He had seen what dragon riding was supposed to look like. That night, Vexthor went to the ancient library, deep beneath the training complex. He pulled out scrolls that had not been read in centuries, documents from the early days of dragon riding, before the Empire. Before war, dragons became weapons. What he read disturbed him greatly. The old texts spoke of partnership, of mutual respect between dragon and rider. They spoke of bonds so deep that rider and dragon became like two parts of one soul. They spoke of dragons as wise, gentle creatures who only fought when necessary to protect those they loved. Somewhere along the centuries, the Drakari had changed all that. They had bred dragons for war. They had trained riders to command and control. They had turned a sacred bond into a tool of conquest. And they had forgotten what they lost. Vexthor closed the scrolls and sat in the darkness, thinking. Above him, in her quarters, Lyra slept peacefully with Ember's consciousness wrapped around hers like a warm blanket. The bond no one wanted was growing stronger every day, and it was beginning to change everything. War Master Krell stood on the balcony of his tower, looking down at the training grounds. His cold eyes watched as Lyra and Ember completed another successful flight pattern. His clawed hands gripped the stone railing tightly. Krell was one of the most powerful military commanders in the Drakari Empire. He had conquered 6 worlds. He had commanded 3 battle fleets. He had personally killed 17 enemy champions in single combat. And he had done it all with his war dragon, Scourge, the largest and most feared dragon in the Empire. But now, watching a human girl fly circles around his trained warriors, Krell felt something he had not felt in decades. Fear. Not fear of the girl herself, fear of what she represented. If humans could bond with war dragons, then the entire foundation of the Empire was built on a lie. The Drakari had justified their conquest of human worlds by claiming humans were inferior, weak, unable to reach the heights of true warrior culture. They had enslaved billions of humans based on this belief. But if a human stable girl could become a dragon rider, what did that mean for everything else? Krell turned away from the balcony and walked to his private chamber. He sat at his desk and wrote 3 letters. The first went to a weapons master he trusted. The second went to a merchant who sold rare poisons. The third went to a group of warriors who owed him favors. War Master Krell had decided. The human girl and her dragon had to fail. One way or another. Lyra woke up in the middle of the night to Ember's panic flooding through their bond. She jumped out of bed and ran to the window. In the dragon yards, Ember was thrashing, making sounds of distress. Without thinking, Lyra ran outside in her sleeping clothes. She climbed over the fence and rushed to Ember's side. What's wrong? What happened? Sick. Ember's thoughts were confused and pained. Something wrong. Food was wrong. Lyra's heart raced. She examined Ember's food trough and found the remains of the evening meal. She sniffed it carefully. There was a strange, bitter smell underneath the normal scent of dragon feed. Guards! Lyra shouted. Someone help, my dragon is sick. 2 guards came running. Behind them came Vexthor, who lived in quarters near the training complex. The old trainer took one look at Ember and immediately called for the dragon healers. The healers worked through the night. They made Ember drink bitter medicine and used their knowledge to flush the poison from the dragon's system. By dawn, Ember was breathing normally again, though still weak. Vexthor questioned the stable workers who had prepared the feed. None of them knew anything about poison. The investigation went nowhere. But Lyra knew. Someone had tried to kill Ember, and that meant someone wanted her gone badly enough to break sacred laws. 3 days later, during advanced combat training, Lyra's practice sword broke in her hands. The blade shattered into sharp pieces that cut her palms. She dropped the weapon with a cry of pain. Kexval examined the broken sword. His expression was grim. This sword was damaged before training. Someone filed through the metal. That same week, Lyra's flying harness came loose during a high-altitude exercise. She nearly fell before Ember caught her. When Vexthor inspected the harness, he found that the straps had been partially cut. Someone is trying to hurt you, Vexthor said to Lyra that evening. They sat in his office, with Ember's head poking through the large window so the dragon could be part of the conversation. These are not accidents. I know, Lyra said quietly. Her hands were bandaged from the sword incident. But who would do this? Vex Thor was silent. He had his suspicions, but he had no proof. And accusing someone like War Master Krell without evidence would end his career or his life. We increase your protection, Vex Thor said finally. You will train with guards present. Your equipment will be checked 3 times before use. And, he paused, looking troubled, and you must win the grand tournament. Lyra looked up in surprise. The grand tournament? But that's 3 months away. That's for elite dragon riders. Yes, Vex Thor said. And if you compete and win, you will earn full rider status. The Emperor himself will grant you protection. Even your enemies will not be able to touch you then. He leaned forward. But Lyra, you must understand. The grand tournament is not like training. Dragons fight until someone cannot continue. Some dragons die. Some riders die. It is brutal. Lyra felt Ember's emotions through their bond. The dragon was not afraid. Ember was ready to fight if necessary to protect their bond. We'll do it, Lyra said. The next morning, Lyra was assigned to a special training exercise in the Death Peaks, a mountain range north of the training complex. It was where advanced riders learned aerial combat in difficult conditions. 12 dragon rider pairs were going, including Lyra and Ember. The exercise was supposed to teach them how to fight in high winds and thin air. Kexval led the group, flying on his blue dragon. Stay in formation, he shouted as they climbed higher into the mountains. Watch for sudden wind changes. The mountains were beautiful and terrifying. Sharp rock formations jutted up like teeth. Deep valleys fell away into darkness. The wind howled between the peaks, making flight difficult. Lyra focused on staying with the group. Ember flew steadily, adjusting to each gust of wind. Through their bond, Lyra could feel the dragon's concentration. They were practicing a complex maneuver, diving through a narrow canyon and pulling up sharply at the end when it happened. Lyra's flight harness snapped. One moment she was secure on Ember's back. The next moment she was sliding sideways, the broken straps dangling uselessly. She grabbed desperately at Ember's scales. But her grip was not strong enough. She fell. The world became a blur of sky and stone. Wind roared in her ears. Below her, jagged rocks waited. Lyra tried to scream, but no sound came out. Through the bond, she felt Ember's absolute terror and determination. The dragon did something that should have been impossible. Ember folded wings and dove straight down. Faster than gravity, faster than falling. The dragon's body became like an arrow, shooting downward with precision that defied physics. Other riders shouted in alarm. Kexval tried to follow but could not match Ember's speed. 50 feet from the rocks, Ember reached Lyra. The dragon's claws, so sharp they could tear through metal, closed around Lyra's body with impossible gentleness. Ember's wings snapped open, catching air, straining against momentum. They stopped 10 feet from the ground. Ember landed carefully and set Lyra down on solid earth. The dragon immediately curled around her, checking for injuries, making worried sounds. Lyra was shaking so hard she could barely stand. I'm okay, she whispered. I'm okay. You saved me. The other riders landed around them. Kexval examined Lyra's broken harness with fury in his eyes. This was cut. Recently. Professionally. He looked at Lyra. Someone knew you would be training here today. Someone wanted you to fall. That night, Vex Thor came to Lyra's quarters. His face was serious and tired. I know who is doing this, he said without greeting. I cannot prove it, but I know. And I must tell you, this person will not stop. They see you as a threat to everything they believe in. Then what do I do? Lyra asked. You survive, Vex Thor said. You train harder than you have ever trained before. You prepare for the grand tournament. And you win. He paused. There is something else you should know. Today, when Ember saved you, I saw something I have only read about in ancient texts. What do you mean? That dive Ember performed, it should not be possible. The dragon moved too fast. With too much precision. No war dragon has that level of control. Vexthor looked at her intently. But the old texts speak of it. They say that when a rider and dragon achieve true unity, they can do things that seem like magic. They become more than the sum of their parts. Lyra thought about the moment of falling, and how she had felt Ember's consciousness merge completely with hers. For those few seconds, she had not been a girl and a dragon. She had been one being with two bodies. "What are we becoming?" she whispered. "Something the Empire forgot was possible," Vexthor said. "Something that frightens the people in power. Because if you succeed, Lyra, everything will change." Over the next weeks, Lyra trained like never before. But now, she trained with purpose. She was not just learning to survive. She was learning to win. Ember showed her more memories from deep in the dragon's genetic past. She saw the first riders, thousands of years ago. Before the Empire existed, she saw how they moved together, thought together, fought together as one perfect unit, and slowly, carefully, Lyra and Ember began to recreate that ancient bond. They developed their own fighting style, different from any other dragon rider pair. They did not rely on strength or aggression. Instead, they used speed, timing, and perfect coordination. When they flew, it was like watching a dance. When they fought in practice battles, they moved as if they could read the future. Other trainees began to watch them with something like awe. Even Kexval, who had mocked Lyra in the beginning, started to show grudging respect. "You fight well, Humyn," he said after one training session. Strangely, but well. But success brought more danger. The sabotage continued. Lyra's food was tampered with. She got sick for 3 days. Equipment continued to fail at dangerous moments. Once, a training accident nearly crushed her when a practice target fell from its supports. Through it all, Ember protected her. And through it all, their bond grew deeper. 2 weeks before the grand tournament, something happened that changed everything. During a night training exercise, Lyra accessed a deeper level of their bond, something beyond memories or feelings. She saw what Ember had always known but could never communicate clearly. War dragons were not naturally aggressive. They had been bred, generation after generation, to be weapons. Their gentler instincts had been suppressed through brutal training and selective breeding. The Drakari had not just conquered other species. They had enslaved their own dragon's true nature, and Ember's generation, these young dragons, were starting to remember what they really were. Lyra sat in the darkness of her room, tears running down her face, understanding the terrible truth. The Empire was built on lies and chains, and somehow, a stable girl and a young dragon had stumbled onto the key that could unlock everything. Outside, Ember slept peacefully in the dragon yards. The grand tournament was 2 weeks away, and Warmaster Krell was running out of patience. On the human colony world of Terra Nova, a young boy listened to his mother tell the story of Lyra Chen and her dragon. In the factories of Epsilon Station, human workers whispered about the stable girl who had been chosen. On the mining planet of Kragthor, humans shared the tale during their short rest periods. A human had bonded with a war dragon. A human was training to be a rider. It was proof. Proof that humans were not inferior. Proof that the Drakari had been wrong. On Terra Nova, 300 workers stopped working and marched to the governor's palace, demanding better treatment. The Drakari governor sent soldiers. Violence erupted. 12 humans died, but the spark had been lit. On Epsilon Station, humans refused to work, the most dangerous factory positions. They said if humans could be dragon riders, then humans deserved safer conditions and fair pay. On Kragthor, a full riot broke out. The mines burned for 3 days. The Empire responded with brutal force. Soldiers were sent to each world. Protests were crushed. Leaders were arrested or killed. But the unrest continued to spread. In the Imperial Council chambers, Commander Zexral received reports with growing anger. 3 worlds in open rebellion. An aide reported. 6 more showing signs of unrest. All because of one girl and one dragon. Zexral slammed his fist on the table. "Then make her fail! Make her disappear! I do not care how it is done. But there was a problem. The grand tournament was now public knowledge. Lyra was registered as a competitor. If she suddenly disappeared or died under suspicious circumstances, it would make the situation worse. The human worlds would erupt completely. War Master Krell had a different idea. Let her compete, he said to the council. Let her face me in the tournament. I will defeat her honorably. In front of everyone. The humans will see that their hope was misplaced. The council agreed. It was the perfect solution. At the training complex, something strange was happening with the other young dragons. During morning exercises, a green dragon named Thorn hesitated when his Drakari rider commanded him to attack a training dummy. The rider shouted the command again. Thorn still hesitated, looking confused. A blue dragon named Skyfall refused to eat the aggressive enhancement herbs that were mixed into dragon feed. The handlers tried to force it, but Skyfall turned away stubbornly. A black dragon named Shadow started making gentle sounds at night. Soft rumbling noises that had not been heard from war dragons in centuries. The trainers noticed but did not understand. They blamed it on a bad breeding cycle or weak bloodlines, but Vex Thor understood. He watched the young dragons carefully and saw the truth. Ember's presence was awakening something in them, just by being herself, by maintaining a natural bond with Lyra. Ember was showing the other dragons that a different way was possible. The dragons were remembering who they really were. One evening, Vex's Thor found Lyra in the dragon yards, sitting beside Ember and reading training manuals by lamplight. You should rest, he said. The tournament is in 1 week. I can't rest, Lyra said. Her eyes had dark circles under them. I'm not ready. War Master Krell has 40 years of experience. His dragon scourge is 3 times Ember's size. How can we possibly win? Vex's Thor sat down on a bench nearby. For a long moment, he was quiet. Then he said, I have been thinking about something. All my life, I was taught that strength wins battles. Size, power, aggression, these were the qualities of a true warrior. But watching you and Ember, you have made me question everything. Lyra looked up at him, surprised. The old texts speak of a different kind of strength, Vex Thor continued. They speak of unity, adaptation, intelligence. The first riders did not win through force alone. They won because they understood their dragons completely. He met Lyra's eyes. You do not need to beat Krell with his own tactics. You need to fight as yourself, as a team that Krell cannot understand. But how? Lyra asked. He's so much stronger. Strength is not everything, Vex Thor said firmly. You and Ember have something Krell has never had with Scourge. You have trust. Real trust. That is your advantage. After Vex Thor left, Lyra sat in the darkness with Ember. Through their bond, she felt the dragon's steady confidence. We are ready, Ember's thoughts came to her. We are stronger together than they know. 3 days before the tournament, disaster struck. Lyra was practicing combat maneuvers in the training yard when 4 masked figures attacked. They came from nowhere, moving fast with weapons drawn. One slashed at Lyra with a knife. Another threw a net over Ember's head. Lyra shouted and tried to fight back. But she was outnumbered. A blade cut across her arm. She fell to the ground. Then Ember roared. The dragon tore through the net like it was paper. Fire erupted from Ember's mouth, not the controlled flames of training, but real burning rage. The attackers scattered, but not before one of them threw a spear that struck Ember's left wing. The dragon screamed in pain. Guards came running. The attackers escaped. When Vex Thor arrived, he found Lyra holding pressure on Ember's wound while the dragon bled heavily onto the ground. Get the healers, Vex Thor shouted. Now, the healers worked for hours. When they finished, they gave Vex Thor grim news. The wing membrane is badly damaged. It will take at least 3 weeks to heal naturally. Maybe longer. 3 weeks. The tournament was in 3 days. Lyra sat beside Ember that night, both of them wrapped in bandages. Through their bond, She felt the dragon's pain and frustration. "I'm so sorry," Lyra whispered. "This is my fault. People are trying to hurt you because of me." "No." Ember's thoughts were weak but firm. "They hurt me because they fear us. Fear what we represent." "What do we do now?" Lyra asked. "You can't fly like this. We can't compete." Ember was quiet for a long moment. Then the dragon shared a memory not from Ember's own past, but from deep genetic memory passed down through generations. A memory of the old healing ways, when dragons and riders were truly bonded. In the memory, a rider shared her life energy with her wounded dragon. The healing happened in hours instead of weeks. But the cost was high. The rider became weak, tired, aged temporarily from the effort. The Drakari had forbidden this practice centuries ago. They considered it shameful for a warrior to weaken themselves for a dragon. The dragon was the weapon. The rider was the commander. They were not supposed to be equals, but Lyra and Ember had never followed those rules anyway. "Show me how," Lyra said. Vexthor found them the next morning. Lyra was unconscious on the ground beside Ember. The dragon's wing was fully healed, the membrane perfect and whole, but Lyra looked terrible. Her skin was pale, her breathing shallow. Her hair seemed to have streaks of gray that had not been there before. "What have you done?" Vexthor whispered, shocked. He carried Lyra to the healing ward. The healers examined her and shook their heads. "She has shared her life force with the dragon. This is forbidden magic. Old and dangerous. She will be weak for weeks, maybe months." "Can she recover?" Vexthor demanded. "Eventually, yes. But she cannot possibly fight in the tournament tomorrow. She can barely stand." But when Lyra woke that evening, she insisted she would compete. "I have to," she said, her voice hoarse. "If I withdraw now, everyone who hurt us wins. All the humans watching across the Empire. They need to see that we tried. That we didn't give up." Vexthor wanted to argue, but he saw the determination in her eyes. And through the window, he could see Ember waiting, the dragon's wing perfect and strong. "You will die out there," Vexthor said quietly. "Maybe," Lyra agreed. "But Ember won't. And our bond won't. And that's what matters." That night, Vexthor sat alone in his office, looking at ancient texts spread across his desk. He read about the old riders who shared everything with their dragons: pain, strength, even life itself. He read about bonds so deep that rider and dragon became one soul in two bodies. The Drakari had called this weakness. They had bred it out of their culture, turned dragon riding into a hierarchy of control and command. But Vexthor was beginning to understand. What the Drakari called weakness was actually the greatest strength possible. Lyra had given her health, her energy, even years of her life to heal Ember. No Drakari rider would ever do such a thing, and that sacrifice had created a bond stronger than any he had ever witnessed. The morning of the grand tournament arrived. 100,000 spectators filled the great arena. Banners flew from every tower. The God Emperor himself sat in the royal box, surrounded by his guards and advisors. In the preparation area, Lyra pulled on her armor with shaking hands. Every movement hurt. She was so weak she could barely lift her sword. But Ember was there, the dragon's consciousness wrapped around hers, lending her strength through their bond. Together, Ember's thoughts came to her. "We are always stronger together." Across the preparation area, War Master Krell checked his weapons. His massive dragon scourge waited nearby, a mountain of black scales and muscle. Krell smiled coldly when he saw Lyra. "You should have stayed in the stables, girl," he called across to her. "This will not end well for you." Lyra did not answer. She climbed onto Ember's back, and they walked toward the arena entrance. Behind them, Vexthor watched with fear and hope warring in his heart. The gates opened. The crowd roared, and Lyra and Ember flew out into the sunlight to face the impossible. Part 5. The Tournament of Two Worlds. The arena exploded with noise as Lyra and Ember entered. 100,000 voices shouted, some cheering, many more jeering. Banners waved in the wind. The sun beat down on the sandy floor. Lyra's vision blurred for a moment. She was so weak from the healing that she could barely hold onto the saddle. Her arms shook, her head pounded, but through the bond, Ember's strength flowed into her, keeping her upright. The announcer's voice boomed across the arena. "Welcome to the grand tournament. Today, 7 Dragon Rider pairs will compete for the championship. Only one will earn the Emperor's blessing and full rider status." The crowd roared again. Lyra looked up at the royal box where the God Emperor sat. He was an ancient Drakari with golden scales and cold eyes. Around him sat the council members, including Commander Zex Ral. They all watched her with expressions that ranged from curiosity to open hatred. On the human worlds across the Empire, billions of people gathered around viewing screens. In factories and mines, on farms and in cities, humans stopped their work to watch. For them, this was more than just a tournament. This was about hope. "Round 1 begins," the announcer called. Lyra, Chen, and Ember versus Corval and Frostbite. A massive blue dragon and its Drakari rider entered from the opposite gate. Corval was a veteran warrior with scars across his arms. His dragon Frostbite was known for its ice breath attacks. The starting bell rang. Frostbite immediately charged forward, trying to use size and strength to overwhelm Ember. Lyra's instinct was to meet the charge, but through the bond, Ember had a different idea. They dodged. Ember was smaller and faster. Instead of fighting strength with strength, they used speed. They flew in tight circles around Frostbite, making the larger dragon chase them. Corval shouted commands, but his dragon could not catch the quick-moving Ember. After 5 minutes, Frostbite was tired and frustrated. That was when Lyra and Ember struck. A quick attack to the flank, then immediately away before Frostbite could respond. Another strike, then retreat. They were like a mosquito fighting a bear, impossible to catch, slowly wearing down the larger opponent. Finally, Frostbite stumbled, exhausted. Corval raised his hand in surrender. The crowd made confused noises. This was not how dragon battles usually went. Where was the fierce combat? The clashing of giants? But Lyra and Ember had won. Round 1 complete. Rounds 2 and 3 followed the same pattern. Lyra and Ember faced larger, stronger opponents. Each time, they won using speed, intelligence, and perfect coordination. They never tried to overpower anyone. They simply outlasted and outsmarted them. By round 4, the crowd began to understand. Some people started cheering for them. Others became angry, shouting that this was not real fighting. In the preparation area between rounds, Vexthor brought Lyra water and medicine. "You are doing well," he said. "But you know who waits in the final round." Lyra nodded. She could see War Master Krell across the arena, watching her with cold calculation. His dragon Scourge was the largest war dragon anyone had ever seen, a black mountain of muscle and rage. "I don't know if we can beat him," Lyra admitted quietly. "Then do not try to beat him," Vexthor said. "Try to show him something he has never seen before." Rounds 5 and 6 tested Lyra's endurance. She was growing weaker with each battle. The healing had taken so much from her, but Ember remained strong. And through their bond, the dragons shared that strength. They moved as one being, anticipating every attack, responding before opponents could adjust. When they won round 6, the crowd's reaction was mixed. Half cheered wildly, half sat in angry silence. The human watching on other worlds erupted in celebration, but everyone knew the real test was coming. "Final round," the announcer called. "Lyra Chen and Ember versus Warmaster, Krell and Scourge." The arena shook as Scourge entered. The massive black dragon was 3 times Ember's size, with scales like armor plates and claws that could tear through stone. Krell sat on his back, tall and proud, 40 years of battle experience in his eyes. He looked at Lyra and smiled coldly. "This ends now, Humyn." Humyn. The starting bell rang. Scourge attacked immediately with overwhelming force. The dragon moved faster than anything that large should be able to move. Fire erupted from its mouth, not training flames, but real dragon fire that scorched the sand black. Ember dodged, but barely. The heat from the flames was intense. Lyra felt her face burning from the near miss. They flew higher, trying to use the sky. But Scourge followed easily, powerful wings carrying the massive dragon upward. Krell guided his dragon with expert precision, cutting off every escape route Lyra tried. He is too strong, Ember's thoughts came through the bond. We cannot outlast him like the others. Lyra's mind raced. Krell was not like the other opponents. He was too experienced, too skilled. He anticipated their moves, and Scourge was too powerful to tire easily. Then Lyra felt something through the bond. A memory Ember was sharing not from genetic past, but from their recent weeks together. The moment when they had healed. When Lyra had given her life energy to Ember, the moment when they had become truly one. And Lyra understood, they could not beat Krell by fighting him. But maybe they did not need to fight him at all. Maybe they needed to fight for something else. Ember, Lyra whispered, trust me completely. Open our bond all the way. The dragon hesitated for only a second. Then Ember did something no war dragon had done in centuries. The dragon opened their mental connection fully. Completely. Holding nothing back. Lyra gasped as Ember's consciousness merged with hers. She felt the dragon's heart beating. Felt the wind under wings that were not hers. Felt instincts and memories from 1,000 generations. And through that open bond, she projected something outward. Not toward Krell, toward Scourge. She showed Scourge what it felt like to be loved. To be respected. To be a partner instead of a weapon. Scourge faltered mid-flight. For the first time in the massive dragon's life, Scourge felt something impossible. Through the bond projection, the dragon experienced what Ember felt every day. Mutual respect. Trust. Joy in working together. Not fear. Not forced obedience. Partnership. Krell felt his dragon's confusion. Scourge, attack. I command you. But Scourge hesitated. Just for 3 seconds. 3 seconds of wondering what life could be like if bonds were different. 3 seconds was all Ember needed. The smaller dragon struck not a killing blow, but a precise hit to Scourge's shoulder that unbalanced the larger dragon. Scourge stumbled in the air, wings beating awkwardly. Krell nearly fell from the saddle. When Scourge recovered, the massive dragon did not immediately attack again. Instead, Scourge looked at Ember with something like curiosity. In ancient eyes, "What are you doing?" Krell shouted at his dragon. "I said attack." He pulled on the control chains, the painful restraints that Drakari riders used to command their dragons. Scourge flinched from the pain and attacked again, but there was hesitation now. Uncertainty. The battle continued for 10 more minutes. Every time Scourge attacked, Lyra and Ember would project their bond outward, and every time, Scourge would hesitate just a little longer. Krell grew desperate. He had never faced anything like this. His dragon was not obeying properly. The usual commands were not working. His perfect weapon was becoming unpredictable. Finally, Krell made a mistake. He pulled too hard on the control chains, causing Scourge real pain. The massive dragon roared in anger, not at Ember, but at Krell. In that moment of distraction, Ember struck again. A perfect hit that knocked Krell from his saddle. The War Master fell toward the ground. Scourge could have caught him easily, but the dragon hesitated, still feeling the echo of Ember's bond, still wondering about this new possibility. Krell hit the sand hard. He did not move. The arena went completely silent. Lyra and Ember landed beside the fallen warrior. Medical staff rushed out. Krell was alive but unconscious, his leg broken from the fall. The announcer's voice shook as he spoke. The winner! Lyra, Chen, and Ember. Half the crowd erupted in cheers. The other half sat in shocked silence. This should not have been possible. A human girl and a small dragon had defeated the Empire's greatest warrior. The God Emperor rose from his seat. The arena fell silent again. Everyone waited to see what would happen. The ancient ruler looked down at Lyra with unreadable eyes. Then he spoke. His voice amplified across the arena. You have won through clever tactics and determination. This is acceptable. I grant you full rider status and a position in my personal guard. It was a great honor. It meant protection, wealth, status. It meant safety from all the people who wanted her dead. Lyra looked up at the Emperor. Then she looked at Ember. And through their bond, she felt the dragon's thoughts. They had not fought for personal glory. They had fought to prove something bigger. Thank you, Emperor, Lyra said clearly. So her voice carried across the arena and to every viewing screen in the Empire. But I must refuse. Gasps echoed through the crowd. No one refused the Emperor. I did not fight to become anyone's weapon, Lyra continued. Her voice was steady despite her exhaustion. I fought to prove that humans and dragons can be true partners. That bonds built on respect are stronger than bonds built on control. She looked directly at the Emperor. Your empire is built on lies. You say humans are weak, but I am standing here. You say dragons are weapons, but they are thinking, feeling beings who deserve freedom. The arena was completely silent now. On human worlds across the Empire, billions of people held their breath. I will not serve your empire, Lyra said. But I will show everyone a different way. A better way. The Emperor's face darkened with rage. You dare refuse me? Guards, arrest her. But before the guards could move, something remarkable happened. Scourge, the massive black dragon, moved to stand beside Ember. The giant dragon lowered its head in the same gesture Ember had made months ago, the gesture of respect. Then, one by one, the other young dragons in the holding pens began to make sounds. Gentle sounds, questioning sounds, the sounds of dragons waking up. Vex Thor stood up in the trainer's box. His voice rang out. The girl speaks truth. I have read the ancient texts. We have forgotten what dragon riding was meant to be. Other voices joined his. Some trainers. Some riders. Not many, but enough. The Emperor looked around at the chaos and made a decision. He could not arrest Lyra without causing a riot. He could not kill her without making her a martyr. So he did the only thing a smart tyrant could do. Let her go, he said coldly. But she is banished from this world. She will never return. Lyra bowed, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. Then she climbed onto Ember's back. Together, with Scourge watching respectfully, they flew out of the arena. Lyra and Ember did not go far. They found a small human settlement on the edge of the Empire's control. Word of what happened spread fast. Within weeks, other humans came seeking her out. Within months, she had trained 3 more human dragon riders using the old methods of partnership and respect. Within a year, there were 20. Within 5 years, the Dragon Rider Academy was forced to change its policies. Young dragons were choosing humans more and more often. The old ways of control and command were failing as dragons remembered what bonds could truly be. The Empire tried to suppress it, but you cannot suppress an idea whose time has come. Vex Thor resigned from his position and joined Lyra. He taught the old knowledge to anyone who would listen, human, Drakari, or otherwise. And Ember, the young war dragon who had walked up to a stable girl and sat down, became legend. The dragon who remembered. The dragon who sparked a revolution simply by choosing to love. Years later, when people asked Lyra how she had changed the Empire, she always gave the same answer. I didn't change anything. Ember showed me that real strength comes from partnership. Not power, from respect, not control. From choosing to stand together instead of standing above. That's what humanity brought to the stars. Not superior technology. Not better weapons. Just the simple idea that every thinking being deserves dignity and freedom. And sometimes, she would say with a smile, looking at Ember sleeping peacefully nearby, that's the most powerful force in the universe. The end.